Marcus Hale never expected to walk into the Grandview Hotel on a Tuesday afternoon and leave without the deed to the building. He had done it 100 times before, walked into rooms, made demands, watched people crumble, bankers, landlords, city councilmen. They all crumbled eventually. Everyone did. Everyone except the heavy-set cleaning woman on the 14th floor who threw a mop bucket at his head. The Grandview sat on the corner of Michigan Avenue and 31st Street in Chicago's South Loop, a mid-tier hotel that had seen better decades. Its carpets were worn thin, its elevator groaned on the way up, and its pipes clanked every morning at 5 when the kitchen staff started their shift. But it sat on a piece of land that Marcus Hale wanted badly enough to send 3 different lawyers, 2 building inspectors, and 1 very uncomfortable fire marshal to pressure the owner into selling. None of it had worked, so Marcus came himself. He was 41 years old, built lean and hard like a man who had never once stopped being angry, with dark eyes that had a way of making people suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. He ran the Hale Organization, which was what his attorneys called it in court filings, and which everyone else in Chicago called something considerably less polished. Real estate acquisitions, waste management contracts, union consulting. On paper, underneath the paper was a machinery of fear and money that had been running since his father built it 30 years ago, and that Marcus had quietly, methodically expanded into something his father would not have recognized. He rode the service elevator to the 14th floor because the general manager, a sweating little man named Gerald, had practically begged him to. Something about discretion. Marcus didn't particularly care about discretion today. The hallway was empty, except for a housekeeping cart parked outside room 1407 and the sound of a vacuum running behind the door. Marcus pushed the door open without knocking. The vacuum clicked off immediately. The woman standing in the center of the room was not what he expected. Though he realized afterward he hadn't been expecting anything specific. She was young, mid-20s at most, with a wide round face and dark brown hair pulled back in a utilitarian bun that was losing the battle against the humidity. She was a big woman, carrying somewhere close to 260 pounds on a 5'6" frame, and she wore the hotel's grey housekeeping uniform like it was the last thing she had grabbed before running out of a burning building. Her name tag read Nora in blocky capital letters. She looked at him with the expression of someone who had been interrupted doing something important and was not yet sure whether to be annoyed or alarmed. She settled on neither. "Checkout was at 11, Nora said flatly. "If you're checking in, front desk is downstairs." Marcus stepped fully into the room and let the door swing shut behind him. He looked around slowly. The maid bed, the cart of cleaning supplies, the open window letting in the wet April air, then looked back at her. "I'm not a guest," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Hale." He said his name the way a man drops a stone into still water, waiting for the ripple. People usually reacted. A sharp intake of breath, a step backward, a sudden, visible effort to remember if they had done anything recently that might require an apology. Nora looked at him like she had never heard of him. "Okay," she said. She picked up a spray bottle from her cart and turned toward the bathroom. "The room's still being cleaned. You'll have to wait in the hall." Marcus blinked. It was not a dramatic blink. It was the blink of a man recalibrating rapidly. "I'm here about the hotel," he said. "I need you to take me to the owner. Mr. Petrov doesn't take walk-ins. He'll take this one." Nora sprayed the bathroom mirror and began wiping it down in slow, deliberate circles. "He's not on the property today. You can call the front desk and leave your information." "I've left my information," Marcus said, his voice dropping half a register. "4 times. I've also sent certified letters, had 2 of my attorneys make personal visits, and arranged for a building inspection that flagged 17 code violations that I'd be very happy to make disappear. Mr. Petrov is being extremely uncooperative, and that concerns me. It concerns me the way things concern me when I need them resolved." Nora set down the spray bottle. She turned around and looked at him with an expression that had shifted slightly. Not to fear, but to something more careful and analytical. Like she was reading the fine print on a contract. "Are you threatening a 73-year-old man?" she said. I'm describing a business situation. You described fabricated code violations. I described code violations that you arranged. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. You're the cleaning staff. I'm aware of what I am, Nora said. She crossed her thick arms over her chest, the spray bottle still dangling from her right hand. I've worked this floor for 3 years. Mr. Petrov owns this hotel and 4 others in the city, and he's been running them since 1987 without any help from people like you. He's not selling. He told you that through his attorneys. He told you that through his attorneys. He told your attorneys that personally. And he told Gerald to call the police if you showed up again. Gerald isn't going to call the police. No, Nora agreed, because Gerald is terrified of you. But I'm not Gerald. She said it so plainly that it took a moment to register, not as a provocation, just as a statement of fact, offered in the same tone she might use to say the checkout time was 11. Marcus walked further into the room. He moved toward her deliberately, using the full geometry of his presence, the height, the stillness, the practiced weight of his attention. He stopped 3 feet away and looked down at her. You're a hotel maid, he said, letting the words land with the full condescension he intended. You make $14 an hour to change sheets and scrub toilets. You've got no stake in this negotiation. You've got nothing I need and nothing I can take from you. So why don't you go back to your cart and let the adults have their conversation? Nora was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then she picked up the full mop bucket from beside the bathroom door. A wheeled industrial unit, 3 gallons of grey soapy water, and with a grunt of effort and the solid, unhurried physicality of a woman who had been hauling laundry and furniture and industrial cleaning equipment for 3 years, she swung it in a short, brutal arc and let go. The bucket caught Marcus directly across the left shoulder and the side of his face, drenching him from the ear down in cold, filthy mop water. He stumbled sideways into the desk chair. It rolled out from under him, and he went down onto one knee against the wall, gasping, his $1,500 suit jacket plastered flat against his chest. There was a moment of absolute silence in room 1407 of the Grandview Hotel. Marcus looked up. Nora was standing exactly where she had been standing, breathing a little harder, but otherwise entirely composed. She set the empty bucket upright with a dull plastic thunk. I mop floors, she said, so my arms are pretty good. And I've been listening to Gerald hyperventilate outside Mr. Petrov's office for 2 months because of you. So I'm going to tell you something, and I'd like you to hear it clearly. She pulled the cart closer and began restocking the bathroom shelf with clean towels. Her wide back turned to him, her voice carrying easily over her shoulder. Alexei Petrov came to this country in 1991 with $40 and a coat that didn't fit. He built 4 hotels. He employs 112 people. He paid for Gerald's daughter's hospital bills when her appendix burst last year because Gerald's insurance didn't cover it. He paid out of pocket. He doesn't sell things he built because some man in a good suit thinks the land is worth more than the people standing on it. She turned around. So no, he's not selling, and the next letter your attorneys send is going to be forwarded directly to the Chicago Tribune business desk, along with a very detailed account of 2 separate visits where representatives of the Hale organization made explicit threats to a 73-year-old naturalized citizen. Marcus got to his feet slowly, his knee soaking wet, his jaw tight. He looked at her. You don't have anything on me, he said. Nora reached into the front pocket of her uniform and pulled out her phone. She pressed play. His own voice came out of the speaker, crisp and clear. I've also arranged for a building inspection that flagged 17 code violations that I'd be very happy to make disappear. She stopped the recording. The phone was on the cart when you walked in, she said. Marcus stood very still. The water was dripping off his jacket onto the carpet. Outside, a siren moved along Michigan Avenue and faded. He could hear the elevator groaning somewhere down the hall. What do you want? He said. I want you to leave. That's not a negotiation. No, Nora said, it's not. You don't get to negotiate with me. You came in here to intimidate a man who doesn't have anything left for you to take. You're leaving. She picked up the empty bucket and set it back on the cart. But before you go, the building inspection people are still here. If you call them off on your way out, I'll delete the recording when I see them leave. If you don't, I'll have sent it to 3 separate email addresses by the time you reach the lobby." Marcus looked at her for a long, careful moment. He was recalibrating again, more thoroughly this time. "You do this often," he said. "Hold crime bosses at digital knife point over mop water." "First time," Nora said. "But I grew up in Humboldt Park. I've dealt with worse than you." Something moved behind his eyes that wasn't anger. He straightened his jacket, which accomplished very little given the circumstances. He pulled out his phone and made a call. 30 seconds of terse instruction. He hung up. "They're leaving," he said. Nora picked up her own phone, opened the recording, and deleted it. She held the screen toward him so he could see the confirmation. "You deleted the only copy," he said. "There's no cloud backup on this phone," she said. "I can't afford the storage plan." Another silence. A different kind this time. "What's your name?" Marcus said. "It's on my name tag." He looked at the tag. "Nora." "Nora Vasquez," she said. "And before you think about looking me up and making this a problem, I rent a room in my cousin's apartment, I have $1,100 in savings, and I drive a 2009 Civic with 1 working window. There is nothing you can do to me that hasn't already been done by student loans and the Chicago rental market." Marcus almost smiled. It was the ghost of a thing, there and gone, like a fish breaking the surface of very deep water. "I'll see myself out," he said. "Please do," Nora said, and turned back to her cleaning cart. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame, his back still to her. "The recording," he said. "You deleted it in front of me. You had all the leverage in the room when you gave it up. You called off the inspectors. I could have been lying." "You weren't," Nora said simply. He turned his head slightly, not quite looking back at her. "How do you know?" "Because you're a man who operates on fear," she said, running a clean cloth along the windowsill. "And I wasn't afraid of you. That genuinely confused you. People who are genuinely confused don't think fast enough to lie." He left. Nora finished the room, stripped her gloves, and went downstairs to tell Gerald the inspectors were gone. Gerald cried a little. She didn't mention the rest of it. 4 days passed. On the 5th day, Nora was on the 10th floor when the service elevator opened and Marcus Hale stepped out. He was wearing a different suit, charcoal gray, not quite as expensive as the ruined one. And he was alone, which was new. No attorneys, no security, no Gerald hovering anxiously in the background. Nora looked at him over her cart. "This is harassment," she said. "I brought a job offer," he said. "I have a job." "I know. 14 an hour, no benefits, 30 hours a week because they keep you under the threshold. You've been here 3 years and you've asked Gerald twice for a raise, and twice he's told you next quarter." He paused. "I did look you up. I apologize for that, but the financial information was only to make a point." Nora crossed her arms. "What point?" "That the job offer is real, not leverage, not a way to put you somewhere I can control you." He said the last part with a flatness that acknowledged she would have already thought of it. "I need someone who can manage information. Not create it, not acquire it, manage it. I have people who work for me who talk too much, and people who don't talk enough, and nothing in between. You have an instinct for when to move and when to wait, and you have something I apparently don't." He looked at her steadily. "You know how to read people before they know they're being read." Nora was quiet for a moment. "Why would I work for someone like you?" she said. "Because someone like me is going to keep coming after the Grandview," he said. "Not me specifically now, but the South Loop is going to get expensive, and Petrov is going to get pressured from 12 different directions over the next 3 years, and the next person who walks through that door isn't going to respond to a mop bucket. If you're inside the organization, you see it coming. If you're outside it, you find out when the demo crew shows up." It was not the answer she expected. She didn't show that, but she filed it carefully. "What does the job pay?" she said. He told her. Nora Vasquez, who had been running calculations in the back of her head since she was 9 years old, and her mother was working 2 jobs and still coming up short every March and every August, did the math in approximately 4 seconds. "I need to think about it," she said. "Take the week," he said. "I'll take 2 days." He nodded once. He turned to leave. She stopped him. "Hale." He looked back. "If this is a way to get to Petrov through me," she said, "I want you to know I will absolutely burn your entire operation down on my way out. I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out. I'm good at figuring things out." The ghost of a smile again. Less fleeting this time. "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I'm here." She took the job. She told herself it was practical. It was practical. The money was real, the benefits were real, and she negotiated, on her own, without an attorney, over a 30-minute phone call with his operations director. A clause that gave her the ability to walk within 48 hours for any reason with full severance. She told Petrov. He was quiet for a long time and then said in his careful, accented English, "You keep your eyes open, Nora. You tell me if you see anything I should know." She said she would. What she did not tell herself, because she was a practical person and preferred not to think about things that complicated practicality, was that she had replayed the moment in the hallway when Marcus said, "I know. That's why I'm here," approximately 40 times in the 2 days she was supposed to be thinking it over. She started work on a Monday. His offices occupied the top 2 floors of a building on Wacker Drive that looked like every other building on Wacker Drive and was therefore invisible, which she suspected was intentional. The legitimate side of the operation was a property management firm called Hale & Associates that was aggressively boring on the surface and considerably less boring 3 floors down in the server rooms and back offices where his actual people worked. She was given a desk, a laptop, a direct line to his personal assistant, and absolutely no explanation of what her job actually was. She figured it out in the first week. She was the person who sat in rooms and listened. Meetings with city contacts, with union reps, with the various lawyers and consultants and contractors who moved in and out of the office all day. Marcus would bring her in, introduce her as his operations associate, and let her sit in the corner and take notes. Afterward, in the elevator or the back of his car, he'd ask her what she'd heard. Not what was said, what she'd heard. It was a distinction that turned out to matter a great deal. She was 3 weeks in when the situation with the 11th Ward contact, a city alderman named Breckenridge, who had been smoothly cooperative for 2 years and had recently, subtly, begun declining meetings, came to a head. Marcus had attributed it to political maneuvering. Nora had watched Breckenridge's aide at the last joint meeting, a young guy named Seth who kept touching his watch, and had a different theory. "Seth is working for someone else," she told Marcus. They were in the back of his car on the way back from a meeting downtown, the Chicago skyline sliding past in the rain. "He's been feeding Breckenridge selective information, the stuff Breckenridge is slow walking. The Pilsen permits, the 31st Street variants, those are exactly the projects someone would stall if they wanted to open up the South Side market for a competitor." Marcus looked at her. "Who?" "I don't know yet. But Seth was wearing a Rolex last week that he definitely wasn't wearing the month before, and Breckenridge's aide doesn't make Rolex money." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Pull Seth's financial disclosure," he said to the driver. Then to her, "How long have you known?" "I suspected last week. I wanted to be sure before I said it." "You could have said it as a suspicion." "I could have," Nora agreed. "But you have a lot of people in your organization who tell you what they suspect, and very few who wait until they're reasonably certain. I didn't want to be more noise." The car was quiet. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering the roof in waves. "Breckenridge is going to be a problem," Marcus said. "Breckenridge is fine," Nora said. "Breckenridge is scared and being badly advised. If you sit down with him directly, without Seth in the room, he'll deal. He's been in that ward for 16 years because he knows which way the wind blows. Right now, he thinks the wind is blowing against you. Show him it isn't. And Seth? Let him think you haven't noticed yet. You'll learn more watching him operate than you will confronting him." Marcus studied her in the dim interior of the car. She was looking out the window at the rain. her wide profile lit faintly by the passing streetlights, entirely unbothered by his scrutiny. "Nora," he said. Why did you take this job?" She turned from the window and looked at him with the same flat, direct gaze she had leveled at him in room 1407 over the mop bucket. "I told you, the money. You negotiated a clause that lets you leave in 48 hours with full severance. You don't need the money badly enough to stay somewhere that doesn't suit you. So why are you still here?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because it's interesting," she said. "I've been doing interesting work my entire life and getting paid for boring work. This is the first time the two lined up." She paused. "And because Petrov's hotel is still standing, and I want to make sure it keeps standing." "It'll keep standing," Marcus said. His voice was different, quieter, like he had made a decision about something. "I know," Nora said, "because I'm watching." The rain outside was relentless now. The car turned north on Michigan Avenue, passing the Grandview on the corner, its neon sign blurred and running in the wet dark. Nora looked at it as they drove past. The call came at 11:40 on a Thursday night. Nora was at her cousin's apartment in Logan Square, in bed with her laptop and a bowl of cereal, reading through the financial disclosures she'd had pulled on Seth. She had found the Rolex. She had also found 3 cash deposits and a new lease on an apartment in Lincoln Park that required a guarantor salary significantly above what city employment provided. She had been about to call Marcus's personal line when her phone buzzed with his number instead. "There's a problem at the 31st Street property," he said. He sounded precisely as controlled as he always did, which told her the problem was serious. "Someone accessed the site office tonight. Security camera caught 2 people going in through the rear access. I'm on my way there now." "Don't go in without knowing who it is," she said immediately. "I have 2 men with me." "Hale." She was already out of bed, pulling on jeans one-handed. "Listen to me. If Seth has been feeding location information to whoever is running him, they know your schedule. They knew you were going to be at that WACA meeting tonight. A construction site at midnight in an area you've been trying to develop is exactly where you'd go if someone wanted you, in an enclosed space with poor lighting and no witnesses." A pause. "Where are you?" he said. "Logan Square, 20 minutes. "Don't." "I'm coming," Nora said. "Tell your men to hold the perimeter and wait." She hung up before he could argue. She drove her 2009 Civic with the one working window south on Western Avenue at a speed that was, technically, illegal. She called a number from memory. Her uncle Rodrigo, who had spent 15 years as a Chicago PD detective before a bad knee retired him, and who now did private security consulting and owed her family approximately 11 favors. "Rodrigo," she said when he picked up. "I need eyes on 3114 South Wabash. Right now. I need to know if there are any vehicles parked within a 2-block radius that don't belong in a construction zone at midnight." She heard him sit up. He knew her voice well enough to not ask questions. "Give me 5 minutes." She got there in 18. Marcus was standing outside the side fence with 2 large men she recognized from the office building lobby, all 3 of them looking at the dark side office building set back from the street. The construction equipment sat in hulking shadows around them. No lights inside. Nora pulled up, got out, and walked over. "Rodrigo counted 4 vehicles," she said, pulling up her phone. 2 of them are registered to a holding company called Meridian Consulting Group. That's the 3rd time that name has shown up in Seth's financial records. She looked at Marcus. "This isn't a robbery. Someone is in there waiting for you." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. In the orange wash of the distant streetlights, his face was difficult to read. But she had gotten considerably better at reading it over the past weeks. "How did you get here faster than the men I sent to pick you up?" he said. "I didn't wait," she said. "You drove to an active threat situation in a car with 1 working window. The window situation is unrelated to my judgment." Something broke open slightly in his expression. Not a smile, not quite, something more complicated. "Meridian," he said. "That's Dennis Waite's front." "I don't know who that is." "Is the competitor I've been trying to identify for 6 months." His jaw tightened. "Seth's been running information to Waite's people this whole time. and Wade decided that taking me off the board was more efficient in competing. "So what do we do?" Nora said. Marcus pulled out his phone and made 3 calls. The third one, she recognized from context, was to someone in the Chicago PD's organized crime unit, a contact clearly rather than a report. When he hung up, he looked at her. 40 minutes, he said. Then this gets handled? By the police? By people who know how to handle a property crime in progress without it becoming a news story. He paused. You should leave. I should stay, Nora said. Nora, if Waite's people come out of that building before your contact arrives, she said calmly, you need someone standing here who they don't recognize and who can tell you which direction they go. Your 2 men look exactly like what they are. I look like a woman who took a wrong turn on her way back from Walgreens. She gestured at herself. Jeans, oversized sweatshirt, hair falling out of its bun. I'm invisible to people like Waite. That's useful. Marcus looked at her for a long time. When I walked into the Grandview, he said slowly, I walked past you in the hallway. You were restocking the cart outside 1407. I didn't look at you. I know, Nora said. I walked past you like you weren't there. Most people do. I won't again, Marcus said. The words came out quieter than he intended. She could tell by the small shift in his posture afterward, the barely perceptible recalibration of a man who had said something more unguarded than he planned. Nora looked at him steadily. The Chicago wind was cold off the lake, cutting through her sweatshirt, and the construction site creaked and settled in the dark around them. I know, she said again, differently this time. The 40 minutes passed in a tense and careful quiet. The contact arrived. The men from inside the site office were removed, processed, and documented in a way that would produce results without producing headlines. Marcus spent 20 minutes on the phone dealing with the downstream consequences. When he finally came back to where Nora was standing near the fence, he looked tired in a way she had not seen before. Tired in the way of someone who had been managing an enormous weight for a very long time and had briefly stopped pretending it wasn't heavy. He stood next to her at the fence. They both looked at the site, the steel bones of the building taking shape against the sky, the cranes motionless and enormous. Waite's going to make another move, he said. He'll make 2 more, Nora said. He's a pressure player. When the first one fails, he recalibrates and comes in from a different angle. You need to be very visible for the next 6 weeks in ways that make clear the organization is functioning normally. No gaps he can interpret as weakness. And Seth? Let him keep operating for another week. Waite won't know his access has been flagged. Whatever Seth passes along in the next week, you control what it is. Feed Waite wrong information and watch what he does with it. Marcus turned and looked at her. Full attention, unhurried. You knew all of this, he said, before tonight. Not all of it. I suspected Waite was the competitor. I didn't know about tonight. But you're working the problem. I'm always working the problem, Nora said simply. It's what I do. The wind picked up. She pulled her sweatshirt tighter. He noticed, and without making a decision about it, took off his jacket and held it toward her. She looked at it. You'll be cold, she said. I have another one in the car, he said. I'm always cold. She took the jacket. It was very warm and smelled like expensive fabric and rain. She put it on. It fit the way clothes that weren't made for her always fit, slightly wrong everywhere. But she didn't take it off. Hale, she said. Marcus, he said. She looked at him. He met her gaze without flinching, which was something she had noticed about him from the beginning. He was one of very few people who actually looked at her fully, without the brief involuntary assessment and subsequent practiced neutrality that she had learned to read in strangers' faces since she was a teenager. He looked at her like she was the whole point of looking. Marcus, she said, testing the shape of it. The Grandview isn't going to be pressured again, he said. I put the address on a protected list 3 weeks ago. Petrov won't hear from anyone. Nora was quiet for a moment. She had suspected this. She hadn't known. Why? She said. Because it mattered to you, he said. And I have found, somewhat inconveniently, that things that matter to you have started to matter to me. Nora looked at the construction site, at the half-built bones of a building that would house people. Eventually, if everything went right and the money held and no one burned it down first. The wind moved through the steel frame with a low, resonant sound. I'm not one of your assets, she said. I'm not something you acquire and hold. I know, Marcus said. You made that clear with the mop bucket. She laughed. It surprised her. A full, genuine laugh. Loud enough that one of his men glanced over from 30 feet away. She covered it quickly, but the warmth of it stayed in her chest. I need you to understand something, Nora said more carefully. I come from people who got hurt by people like you. My mother worked 2 jobs for 20 years, and a property company just like yours bought her building and raised the rent until she had to move her family to a cousin's place in Cicero. I don't forgive that. I haven't forgiven it. She paused, but I also believe people are capable of operating differently than they have, sometimes, under the right conditions. What are the right conditions? Marcus said. Accountability, Nora said, to someone who isn't afraid of them. He was quiet for a long time. Nora Vasquez, he said finally, the same way she had heard him say names of buildings, like he was measuring the weight of something, calculating what it could hold. You are the most inconvenient person I have ever met. I'm aware, she said. I mean that as the highest possible compliment. She looked at him sideways. The Chicago skyline rose behind him in the distance, indifferent and brilliant against the low clouds. I know, she said. She handed him back his jacket. He took it without looking away from her. She walked back to her car, the Civic with the one working window, gears grinding slightly on the shift to third, and she drove north through the wet Chicago night, and she did not stop thinking about the exact quality of the silence between them for the entire 20-minute drive home. Petrol's hotel was still standing. The permits for the South Loop project were still moving. Wait would make another move, and she would be ready for it. And Marcus Hale, the most dangerous man in Cook County, had taken off his jacket in 30-degree weather and handed it to her without being asked. Nora Vasquez had grown up learning to count what she had. She was very good at it. And driving home through the rain, she counted carefully and found that what she had was considerably more than $14 an hour and $1,100 in savings. She found that for the first time in a very long time, she was genuinely curious about what came next. I keep thinking about the moment Nora picked up that mop bucket, not the throwing of it, the decision before the throwing, the half-second where she knew exactly what it would cost her and did it anyway. That's the part I can't stop turning over. Because here's what strikes me about how this whole thing unfolded. Nothing that happened to Marcus Hale was accidental. He had spent years building a machine that ran on one fuel, the assumption that people without power would act like people without power, that they'd calculate the risk, see the gap between what they had and what he had, and step aside. And for years, that assumption was correct. Because most people do that math and get the same answer, Nora did the math and got a different answer. Not because she was reckless, but because she was paying attention to something Marcus wasn't. She was paying attention to what was actually true, rather than what was supposed to be true. That's the thing about intelligence that I think gets misunderstood. People treat it like a credential, something you're born with or trained into. But what Nora had wasn't a credential, it was a discipline. She watched Seth touch his watch. She listened to the way Marcus phrased his threats and heard the word arrange sitting right there in the open. She noticed the Rolex on a city ade's wrist. None of that is genius. All of it is the practice of actually looking at the world in front of you instead of the world you've decided to see. Marcus looked at Nora and saw a cleaning woman. He saw the uniform, the cart, the job title, and stopped looking. She never stopped looking. She never stopped looking. That difference cost him everything in that room on the 14th floor. And it kept costing him every week she sat in the corner of his meetings and heard what was underneath, what was being said. But here's the part that really gets me. Nora deleted the recording. She had the leverage, she verified he'd kept his word, and she let it go. A lot of people would have kept it. Just in case. Just as insurance. And I understand that instinct. I felt it myself. The urge to hold something back. To protect yourself against the next betrayal before it happens. But there's a kind of integrity that only works if it's unconditional, if you deal honestly only when it's safe. It isn't honesty. It's strategy wearing honesty's clothes. Nora made a deal. The deal was honored, and she closed the account. That's what made Marcus trust her with something real. You can't manufacture that. People feel the difference. And then there's the fact that she drove a 2009 Civic with one working window to an active threat situation at midnight because someone she'd started to care about needed eyes on the ground. That's not strategy. That's not calculation. That's just the willingness to show up when showing up is hard. The willingness to be cold and scared and underdressed in a construction site at midnight, because the alternative is letting something important happen without you. That kind of persistence doesn't look glamorous from the outside. It looked like a woman in a sweatshirt, talking to a crime boss next to a chain-link fence. But that's almost always what real courage looks like. Unremarkable from 20 feet away. Completely unmistakable up close. Nora didn't change Marcus Hale's world by being extraordinary. She changed it by refusing to be ordinary in the ways he expected. She saw clearly, she acted honestly, and she kept showing up. That's the whole thing, as far as I can tell. That's always been the whole thing.